Good morning, everyone. How's everybody doing on this lovely Tuesday morning? I think I'm going to give everybody a break on Thursday because we're all getting ready for the gala. So this will be the last training session we have there before I see you all on Saturday in person. Today, we're going to talk about what to do when our deals fall through, reasons deal falls through, and then what we do when our deal falls through and how we handle that situation. So I'm just going to share my screen here with you guys. Okay, what do you top 8 reasons that our deal falls through? So what are the reasons that our deal fall through? Okay, so obviously you're selling a home and we're doing this talks both from the seller side and the real estate professional side. But what are the reasons that our deals fall through? So inexperienced or incompetent real estate agents. Nobody's incompetent. If you're inexperienced is the biggest thing. I think that if you guys are unsure what you're doing, how to firm up your transactions, how to follow your timelines and stuff, you should be asking questions as newer agents or even as agents who have forgotten, maybe you haven't done a certain thing in a long time when it comes to a deal. But whether you're the buyer or the seller, it's important to understand that, you know, us as the agents working for that buyer or seller, we have to be competent, meaning that we're sticking to our timeline. So a lot of times deals fall through because people aren't getting their financing done in time or their home inspections done in time. We're not waiving conditions in a timely manner, right? Maybe we give the status certificate to the lawyer. A lot of people misunderstand those clauses. You got to make sure you're reading them correctly. So a lot of times the clause will read that, you know, the seller has 10 days to get that to you, but then you only have 2 days to return an answer from your lawyer. I know I've argued with a lot of agents out there who think that they have 10 days, right? Because they're not reading their clauses correctly. So I don't like the word incompetent, but this article uses incompetent. I think inexperienced. So if you're unsure when you're working on your deals, how to firm up your deal and whether everything is done, all your due diligence is done, everything's done on your part, come and ask, right? Because your clients are relying on you to do those things during the transaction, to mine those things. They're not aware that they might have to waive a condition in 5 days, right? So we're successfully negotiating through our inspections with our inspectors. We're confirming bank appraisal results that they match, that the lenders are, you know, coordinating and they're happy with the appraised value that came in. We're ensuring the potential home buyer gets approved. So we're making sure that their financing is coming in with their lender, right? And we're following up with attorneys to assure that closing documents are being reviewed and prepared. So I know a lot of agents don't know that maybe if the clients haven't forwarded their documents or if you haven't provided your clients with their accepted offer, how does their lawyer get that document? How does their lawyer know that they're opening a file, right? You have to inform your clients that they have to be calling their lawyers and you have to be sending the documentation to their lawyers and confirming that they have everything that they need. All the accepted documents, the waivers, the confirmation of cooperation, so they know how to put on the ledger for commissions and everything. This is all part of our job, right? So competency, yes, but definitely experience will let you know. I used to keep a little checklist. There's no harm in that. If you want to just sit down and write down everything you have to do during a transaction, and write down a little checklist for yourself, it keeps you on top of things to make sure that you're following through the whole transaction properly for your clients. Okay, another reason that deals fall through is that buyers can't sell their homes. Now, we don't see this clause. We used to see this clause saying that I'll purchase your home for, you know, $700 if I can sell my home within 30 days, right? A lot of times, especially when the market was high, this clause would never fly. But it doesn't mean that that's still not a reason that deals fall through. A lot of time people are banking on the fact that the money is coming from the sale of another property, either their primary home or a secondary home that they're selling. So if they don't sell that house in time, a deal can fall through because they're not getting the funds from there, right? So if you're selling your home and you receive an offer from a buyer that is contingent on the sale of your home, you should not count on that particular buyer shaking your hand at the closing table, right? Which is why we really don't see this clause happen anymore. But like I say, it does happen. People just in the background figure, oh, no problem. You know, if I put 2-3 months closing on, I can sell the property, right? Which a lot of times, I don't know, I get this differing opinion. So I'll ask you guys who are working, when your client asks the advice, should I sell first or buy first? What do you guys usually say to them? What do you guys prefer? I've heard different answers, and there's no right, there's no wrong.
Well, it depends on the market. Right now, you could sell first.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, you can maximize on the fact that your property is value, and it might go down in the future because of expecting.
Mhm,
But if it's the other way around,
mhm.
then you can back out the fact that God will tell you how to be, so you go that route.
Yeah, exactly. When you're more confident, definitely in a higher market. Yeah. I always like selling first because you just never know the surprises you hit, right? Because I always tell my clients, I go, you know what date you're working with, you know how much money you have in hand. I said, it's just a safer way to do it. It makes me feel better at the end of the day than purchasing something. And now you're bound to it, whether we can sell your house, can't sell your house, whether we get less money than we're expecting, right? So sometimes it just happens. I had that 120 Harvest Moon and it was in a good market, but they just wouldn't give us our price, even though other things that I thought similar sales sold, they just weren't giving us our price. We got less than we were expecting. So sometimes you just don't know if you purchase first, right? But that lady wanted to purchase first because she had a really specific product she was looking for. She was looking for a bungalow in an area where there weren't a lot of bungalows, right? She just wanted to be in that little pocket. So, but most of the time, I feel safer selling than buying. Definitely, it's less likely the deal's going to fall through because, like I say, you know what money you're working with in hand, and you know the closing dates and everything that you have already agreed upon. Okay, another reason the deal can fall through is because of inspection issues, right? So potential buyers have the option to perform several different types of inspections when you're buying the home. We all know this. We put in a 5-day clause. We weren't seeing it happen too much when the things were really hot, during COVID times and things were flying off the shelf. But now we have a little more time to put in those clauses. I find it's really good to get back to this time. I feel so much better selling a house with time for a home inspection because I don't hold my breath at closing and sort of pray that that person moves in and there's nothing wrong with the house, right? So encourage your clients to take care of them and see, go for their home inspections and make sure everything's okay with the home. But it's definitely a reason that a deal can fall through. You have accepted a price and then, they're going to go in on the home inspection and see that there's mold or pests, foundation structural issues, roof leaks, damages, you name it, whatever reason they want to back out that they don't like that there's something wrong with the property, deal may fall through because of not a good inspection. Okay. And again, this is the most obvious one and it happens most often. And so we don't want to waste our time. We should be we should be qualifying our buyers, working as a co-op agent. If you're working as a seller agent, sometimes you don't have control over their buyer. You're going to ask the right questions to them to sort of avoid it and not waste time. You're going to say to those co-op agents, is your client qualified? Have they been pre-approved for a mortgage? Do they have enough down payment? If they're in a market where they're going to be putting the price over asking, do they have enough to bridge the gap if the appraisal doesn't come in? You're going to try to combat all the reasons why the deal would fall through for your client because you don't want it to fall through at the end of the day. But sometimes we just can't help the fact that our clients get rejected for their mortgage. Either, maybe their debt to income ratio is off or they just don't have enough income to qualify or whatever the reason is. Maybe the interest rate's too high for them now. It's taking them out of the bracket to be able to afford this home. Maybe you guys have been looking for the last 6 months in, something for 900,000, but now that the interest rate's gone up, your client's buying power has gone down a little bit, right? So there's a bunch of different reasons you guys should be only working with people with pre-approved, whether you're on the buy side or the sell side. On the sell side, it's hard because most agents will just tell you, oh yeah, no problem. Yeah, if you can get a pre-approval letter, it's great. It gives you a little more confidence, right, for your clients. But yeah, so there's also different reasons after they firm a deal, right? So for instance, they said buyer loses their job. If between now and closing, just because I have a firm deal in hand, it doesn't mean that deal is going to close necessarily in a month or 2 months, because the banks will go back and do another check. And if that buyer loses their job, the deal could fall through, right? If they experience health issues or hardship in between now and then, maybe they're unable to close the transaction. A lot of times people separate. It's not even just necessarily from a spouse. Sometimes maybe partners going in on a transaction and now one partner ducks out of the situation. Different reasons. There's a million reasons I've seen, and I'm sure anybody who's working a lot has seen a bunch of different reasons too, but those are just some examples of what can happen, of why they wouldn't close after they firm up their financing clause. Like I say, most of the time you're kind of blindsided by those ones because once you're firm, a lot of people sort of breathe easy and just wait for closing, right? But you definitely want to keep in, especially on longer closings. Like for instance, this next issue, bank appraisal issues. Huge problem in the sort of markets that we're working in right now. If somebody purchased something at the beginning of this year and they put a long close on it, we saw a big change in our market from say March to 6 months after, right? So if you had a closing say in September and you had sold it in March, you may have purchased it for $150,000 over asking, right? Before the property is closing in September now, the bank goes in and does an appraisal. Our market has fallen a great deal from March to September, right? So you got to know what market you're working in order to combat your deal falling through. You got to say, now I know the interest rates are going up and the prices are sort of going down. So if I'm working for the purchaser or the seller, I would prefer short closings right now because we're in a not a stable market where we can predict what's going to happen in the next few months, right? We have another rate hike coming, tomorrow, right? So anything you're selling today, you definitely don't want to put a 2, 3, 4 month closing on it. You want them to close as soon as possible because you want to sort of hold that price, that value, because if the bank appraisal is coming in low, your client has to come up with that money in between in cold hard cash, right? Because the bank won't be funding it in their mortgage. Okay. Issues with closing documents. So prior to a closing occurring, there are many documents that are reviewed, typically by the attorneys for the buyer, the seller, and the bank's attorney. A real estate deal can fall through due to issues with these closing documents. So common issues, outstanding liens, the biggest one. Has anybody ever had a deal fall through? Anybody online there had a deal fall through because of an outstanding lien, right? Really hard to work with. So I had a funny deal that happened. I sold a condo at, I forget the number, 121 Centennial, just over here. Oh, sorry, I'm pointing the wrong way, east. And there was nothing wrong with the individual condo townhouse unit. But what happened was the condo had some construction done on the concrete on the stairs. They weren't happy with it. They were in a dispute with their contractor. And so they put a lien on the condo, right? And there was, say, about 55 condo townhouse units. And so when the lawyer went to go check a week before closing, we're told, he goes, I can't close. There's a lien on the property. And we're talking to our sellers, and our sellers are going, we don't have a lien on our property. It's not our fault. And the lawyer's going, no, it's the condo board. And so what happens is when they put a lien on the condo, each unit has a proportionate share of that lien, right? So they had two choices. They could pay it out, which the sellers didn't want to do because they didn't feel it was their problem. It was the condo not paying for it from, they have a reserve fund. They're paying for these big maintenance issues from the reserve fund, or they could just let the deal fall through. So my deal ended up falling through, right? So definitely a very surprising thing. Even though you can ask all the questions, both the sellers and the buyers were unaware that this lien existed, right? Public record errors. So a lot of times there's things haven't been changed on file. I don't know how many searches you guys have done, but have you ever gone into search in Geo Warehouse and it's completely the wrong property attached to that name, or that name is like, or that property has a wrong city in it? I don't know if you've ever come across that. I have a couple of times. It's been strange. I'm trying to think of an example and I would show you guys, but I know that I've been very surprised where I come and it's supposed to be like in Toronto and it's showing me somewhere in Magnetawan and I'm going, that doesn't match, right? So you have to get those, even though they're not your faults as an agent or your seller or your buyer's fault, if there's public record errors, which, happens, they're only human and they're entering it in the system, that has to be cleared up. Past bankruptcies, right? That's, self-explanatory. If there's a bankruptcy and the debt's due on that property, they're just going to be against it. And missing heirs. So I guess, somebody's realizes the property's for sale. So I sold a property last year. A good example of this, missing heirs. The husband and wife had separated, right? And the title was only in hubby's name. And once she realized that he was selling the property, she went to the lawyer, and the lawyer contacted us to say that she had stake in the property because it was their matrimonial home, even though she wasn't anywhere in the picture and she wasn't on title or anything, right? So we had to sort that out and sort of delay closing. Luckily, that one didn't fall through, right? So definitely all good reasons. Short sale, pre-foreclosure issues. So you see a lot of short sale, short closings when it's foreclosure, sort of trying to beat the bank. The seller's trying to sell, someone's trying to close real fast. Sometimes those are real iffy, you know, sometimes you just can't get things coordinated between a lawyer. It's too quick a closing with those things. Buyer experiences remorse. So this is a good one because it's not a good reason to get out of the deal. You can't let your clients just get out of a deal for buyer's remorse, but it does happen. Sometimes they feel like they overpaid, especially in bidding wars. They don't end up bringing the deposit the next day. They decide they don't want the property for some reason or other. So buyer's remorse is definitely another reason that the deals fall through. So you have to be careful, like I say here. So that's just a quick, I wanted to go over those so we're kind of aware of the pitfalls that can happen and why our deals might fall through, right? So what do we do when our deals fall through, right? Everybody good online there? So most of the time we go to sign a mutual release. So I just did a little definition of what our mutual release is, right? A mutual release is a piece of paper you need to sign when the deal has been agreed to and will not be closing due to the buyer or seller not satisfying a condition. Sometimes buyers think I don't need to sign a release because I never gave a deposit. So we can't stress how wrong this is. You have to tell your clients that no matter what, at the end of the day, they are signing a legal document. Once you sign, just because you don't bring the deposit and you don't have that money at stake at the brokerage, it doesn't mean the seller can't turn around and sue you. So I get that a lot, you know, from buyers. If you don't sit down and explain it to them, well, I just won't bring the deposit, right? So you need to read your agreement. If your agreement does not say that failure to provide a deposit makes the offer null and void, then you're still liable for the agreement you signed. Okay. When you sign a mutual release, it does two things. First, it says who's getting the deposit. So if there's one, usually the deposit goes back to the buyer, but it doesn't have to. So say they want damages because now they're doing a mutual release and it's already been a month into waiting for closing and they've wasted that time in the market. And maybe the seller says, you know, I can go, now the market's fallen, I'm going to sell for less. So I can turn around and sue you at this point. Maybe I'm going to keep half of the deposit. So that has to be detailed in the mutual release, who the deposit's going back to, right? Usually we write, you know, I have an example of a mutual release, but usually we write, you know, returning the deposit back to Shahid in full without deduction kind of thing. Right. Secondly, and more importantly, all parties, including the realtors, agreed that the agreement is at an end and that no one will sue anyone for damages. That's the real benefit of a mutual release to anyone. So just because people think, oh my God, you know, I'm going to lose the deposit, that's not all that's at stake. You definitely can get sued for a lot more, right? I don't know if you guys have ever seen what the mutual release document looks like. So I pulled one up real quick here. And so you're just going to fill it out and you're going to say, you're copying basically what's on your agreement of purchase and sale. So you're going to put between the buyer, whoever the buyer is, and the seller, and the listing brokerage and the co-op brokerage, right? For whatever the property is and the date of your agreement of purchase and sale, not today's date, whatever the date was that you put the agreement of purchase and sale together. And here you're going to itemize what deposits on file. So say it's $20,000. And here's where I would put payable to Christine Boland in full without deduction, or Christine Boland receives half of the deposit back, whatever agreement you've come between the two parties, right? And then you're going to make it irrevocable. So it's not something that somebody has to sign. You make it irrevocable because they have to accept whatever you're proposing in the mutual release, whichever party is requesting the mutual release, right? So it's an irrevocable and they have to sign within that time. So it works almost like an offer where you put it in and it's a time limited thing and they have to sign and send it back and accept and acknowledge that that's what they've agreed upon, right? So that's just a quick look at that. Anybody got any questions so far? How's everybody online? I hope that by talking I don't want to see everybody's deals fall through. You got to know what to do and you have to know how to handle it properly to protect your clients at the end of the day. But I definitely hope that talking about the reasons deal fall through is a good help to you guys to figure out how to not let that happen. You know what I mean? How to prevent that from happening, how to combat it if you feel it's happening, you know what I mean? How to sort of do damage control on it. Okay. So what do you do when a deal falls through? This is the main source of our topic today. What do we do? Okay. Oops, let me just close some things here. My screen's a little bit crowded. Okay. So you'd cancel your house purchase, but you're worried about what happens when your real estate deal falls through. Who gets the deposit? When a deal falls through, it's not something that's not your fault. For instance, say by something by nature, a flood happens, or there's a terrible storm and a tree falls on the house. Sometimes it's beyond your control. So flood or severe weather damage to the home that's beyond repair, it's called a frustrated contract, which means that neither party is to blame for the contract falling through. So how do you deal with these sort of things? What it means when your deal falls through. Buyers and sellers are legally bound by the written terms and conditions in their agreement of purchase and sale. Over and over and over again, I'll say this because a lot of our clients just sign willy-nilly. I keep on cautioning everybody now because things are so easy with e-signature. We just send it to our client, they open up their phone, half the time they're not even opening on a computer, and they just sort of go click, 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 and they're not paying attention to what they're signing. Make sure you govern yourselves when you're going through your transactions. Shoot your clients a text and say, hey, I just sent you that e-signature. Let me know if you want me to review the document with you. Because a lot of times clients will turn around and point the finger right back at you, even if you're trying your best, and they'll say, I don't know what you sent me. You just told me to sign and I just clicked the screen, right? They're not reading it. Yeah, it's difficult, right? So it's so easy for them to do that. So make sure they know that it's a legally binding agreement that they're signing. They're putting their name on something legally binding for, most of our products out there are close to $1 million now. It's like an everyday product, right? To be $1 million, it's nothing. I remember back in the day, if you got $1 million listing, you were like, woohoo, like it was a big thing, right? Now it's nothing, right? It's every day. So buyers typically lose their deposit when a deal falls through, and you could be liable for any damages the seller suffers. Your good faith deposit is only released if the sale goes through, so it gets credited to your down payment then. You mutually agree to it, so a mutual release is signed, or if the contract specifies it, okay? Can
the buyer after mutual release?
Can a what, sorry?
After mutual release signed, you can sue the buyer?
No.
No.
So that's the whole point of the mutual release. So even if there's no deposit, say the buyer didn't bring the deposit. Say I sold a property last night, we signed it. It's a legally binding agreement. Well, now that buyer never brought the deposit. And now today it happens a lot, right? Yeah. And then you still have to sign that mutual release. If you're the listing agent before you put it back on the market, if you're the buyer agent, you want to do it to protect your client, to make sure that the seller doesn't turn around, sell it, maybe sell for less, and then come chasing after your buyer. So it's not only all about the monies involved. It's not only about the deposit involved. It's definitely about the legality of it, saying that we're not going to go and sue each other after. Nobody's legally bound.
Nobody can go after it.
No, it would be definitely tough. Yeah. That's why I say it says where the deposit's going, and it says that nobody's suing each other thereafter. Nobody's chasing. The deal is done. Everybody's square. We're good. We're both releasing each other from any liability, right? So the 4 consequences when a deal falls through. The actual consequences when a real estate deal falls through depend on your contract, generally speaking. So you have to tell your clients, you have to be serious when they are ready to have a deal fall through. You could lose your entire deposit, right? Your seller could ask to be compensated for storage or moving expenses, real estate expenses, opportunity loss. Being under contract discourages other potential buyers from touring a property. So it's taking them off the market, essentially, when you're bound to a contract and they see even sold conditional sometimes kills how many showings you're getting and stuff, right? Or making an offer. Other people are not going to make an offer during that time. If the seller is delaying in selling, you could be out of pocket. So you could be sued for the difference between your offer and the final selling price. So again, say we sold something in March, it had a long closing on it. It didn't close in August because the appraised value was low. Okay. You have to prepare your buyer. Your buyer just can't say, oh, the appraisal didn't come in, the market's fallen now. They have to be ready to be prepared to pay that deficit, that chunk that's missing. If not, they're liable. So either way, they're going to lose their deposit. It's better for them to close because they're going to lose the deposit, and the seller is going to sell for less now, and they're going to be responsible for that difference in price, right? The seller can come after them for it. A court could compel you to buy the property, Legally, buyers and sellers are required to perform or fulfill the conditions contained in the real estate contract. While unlikely, a court could hold you responsible for the entire purchase price plus expenses and court costs. It's called specific performance, right? So avoid losing your deposit if the deal falls through. How do you avoid losing your deposit? How do you do some damage control for our buyers? Because sometimes we just can't control the things that happen. It doesn't necessarily mean that you haven't done your job. As long as you've gone through all the steps, you've done your due diligence, sometimes you just can't help the things that happen, right? You're going to try first to arrange for a mutual release. It's the best case scenario because, like we were saying, it relieves everybody from their financial obligation to the transaction, but also to their legal obligation to the transaction, right? So returning a deposit requires the seller and buyer to mutually agree. Even if your contract is conditional on a satisfactory home inspection or mortgage financing, a mutual release clause is obligatory. It prevents the seller from instructing their realtor to withhold your deposit or pursuing you in court to keep it. So the deal I talked about it, I'm pretty sure it was 121 Centennial, but it was definitely Centennial over there east. That deal, the sellers were refusing to sign the mutual release at first because they said it wasn't their fault the deal was falling through. But my buyers, it wasn't their fault either because nobody was aware of this construction lien put on the condo, okay? I ended up trying to assist my clients in calling the brokerage because that's what we normally do. If agents don't cooperate, we tend to try to deal with the broker of records or the broker managers at the brokerage to try and, to speak to their agents and like figure things out, right? Sort of dispute resolution, right? The brokerage advised me that they cannot release deposits, right? And this is like one of my first experiences. They can't release that deposit. If the seller does not sign that mutual release, they cannot direct it unless they're court appointed to do so, right? So there's nothing that's going to get that deposit released unless buyer and seller agree. But it's the most ideal thing. So like I say, when deals are falling through, just, don't get too personally involved with it. I know a lot of agents get really hot about things. And I've dealt with a lot of like angry agents. And I always say, it's business. Don't worry. Like, it's like not our personal things falling through. And sometimes we can't help it. But it's the best case scenario for both clients to sign that mutual release. Put agreements in writing is another thing. Courts follow what a contract says unless the seller defaulted by canceling the sale or the contract is frustrated through no fault of the buyers or the sellers. Expect to lose the deposit if you walk away. Think it over before signing firm offer real estate contracts. So like I say, I kind of breathe a sigh of relief because I know what happens. A lot of time, you're going to get lucky 99% of the time when you're getting into the market, like the market we had at the beginning of this year. You're going to be signing firm deal after firm deal after firm deal. And that's fine. And that's great because 99% of the time it works. But the 1% of the time it doesn't, you and your clients will get burned badly for it. So it's sort of like a chance thing when you're signing those firm deals. You have to be very careful that your clients understand when they're signing a firm deal, what those things mean. No deposit is no excuse. So we talked briefly about that. Failing to pay a deposit does not relieve you of legally binding terms in your contract. The seller can only relist the property or accept other offers if the contract specifies non-payment terminates the sale. Otherwise, the contract requires you to do exactly what it says. Legally binding, just because you don't bring the money in, does not matter. Can a deal fall through after closing? Okay, so this is a sort of, not so often happening thing, thank goodness, but can we still have a deal fall through after closing? What can happen after closing? You think, oh, it's closed, it's great, I'm done, nothing's happening. So yeah, okay, so this is home is our yard and messy. Do you think that's a good excuse? I don't think it's a good excuse, right? A lot of people think, oh, I'm going to back out of this deal because I walked in and they didn't clean and they left mattresses and, they didn't mow the lawn and the backyard was full of junk. So was the home something other than broom swept condition? In other words, clean and tidy when you took possession, debris everywhere, broken down furniture tossed in the yard. Ask the seller to pay for a cleaner. You may be temporarily inconvenienced, but the handover otherwise carries on as normal. If delays are unreasonable, pass on negotiating, clean it up yourself and take the seller to court. So not a reason you can fall through after closing. I get a lot of clients that come to me and say, oh, I'm not taking it. It was messy. There's mattresses everywhere. Like, you can't do it. You just have to deal with it in court after. Patent defects are obvious. So visible problems like holes in the wall known as patent defects are frankly worth, oh, my battery's running low. How? I got it plugged in. How are we running low here? Not liking me there. Oh, there we go. Okay. I just don't want to lose you guys there if my battery dies. So unless the agreement, so let me close this window. Oh my goodness, I don't think my cord likes me today. I think it's getting pulled here by the door. All right. So, well, yes, don't be sorry, guys. They're online. I'm just trying to get my cord sitting a certain way so it doesn't lose you guys. I think it's okay now, Shahid. I think it's over here because every time I move it over here, it's fixing it. Thank you, thank you. So patent defects. So visible problems like holes in the wall known as patent defects are not worth pursuing. They're things you should have seen while you're walking through, either the buyer or your agent or a home inspector. They're quickly visible. They're in plain sight. They're not considered something. Serious defects. Likewise, a written agreement with a professional home inspector may relieve them of a responsibility for latent defects, unobvious defects like crumbling foundation or home flood zone. Before you talk to a lawyer, check the seller property information sheet, which isn't always available. We know that it isn't always available on the listing, to see if a defect was listed. So if somebody was really trying to hide something, again, it's not a reason the deal can fall through, but you can definitely chase the sellers for it. I had a purchase in Peterborough, and our home inspector saw that there was water damage on the baseboard. And the seller insisted it was not a problem. It was not a problem. It was not a problem. And right enough, my client moved in, and the first spring she had a flood in the basement. Luckily, before closing, I said, I'm not taking a word for it. I had the seller's agent write us an email, forward us an email that their sellers had written, promising that there was no existing problem. There was no previous problem. It was just something I think they said they had spilled something or they had let something overflow. But right enough, there was a problem with the foundation. So my client went back because we had that in writing, right? So there is reasons you can go back for these sort of things, especially if they're trying to hide it like that. When do you need a real estate lawyer? Lawyers negotiate with sellers or buyers, lawyer to resolve deposit disputes. They also resolve disputes like, patent and latent defects after the fact. They thoroughly review your contract for who keeps the deposit and add essential clauses that protect you from costly misunderstandings. Best questions to ask lawyers when buying a house. Even if you've already signed your contract, a lawyer might be able to amend or extend your agreement of purchase and sale. Real estate lawyers discharge mortgages, finalize financing agreements for lenders, and search title property to transfer to your name. When the deal is done, they even give you the keys to your new home. So definitely lean on your lawyers to help you read your contracts. You know what I mean? Even if especially if you're navigating something that's not an everyday product and clauses you can't see, don't be afraid to consult that lawyer. Ask your client, say, which lawyer are you using? Get them to take a quick read of this. I'm not really sure I like this clause that they put in here. Or do you think this protects you enough? For instance, like that water damage, we could have approached the lawyer. I went the route of getting email that time, but we could approach the lawyer and say, we saw the water damage is there. If we could somehow put something in there saying that from the seller's lawyer saying that they're claiming there is no water damage. If there's any problem in the future, that they'll rectify the situation, right? So like I say, hopefully you guys, your deals don't fall through, but that's sort of something to let you guys think when you're doing your transactions. There's lots of ways to combat it. Like I say, whether you're the buyer or the seller's agent, you should be watching either way that your deals aren't falling through. It should be something, because you guys should be taking every deal. You should be looking over every contract, I should say, carefully with a fine tooth comb. A lot of these agents are tricky. You know what I mean? Like sometimes you get used to reading clauses. I hope you guys are reading clauses all the time. If the office is preparing your offer, or even if you're copying and pasting, or if you're receiving an offer as a selling agent, sometimes people change things. Like you say, oh, this offer is conditional on finance. Okay, this offer is conditional on inspection. No, you guys should be reading the whole clause, because people change things maybe from 5 days to 2 days or 5 days to 10 days, depending on which favor they want it to go. I find I've experienced in training, a lot of people pull those Schedule Bs off of everybody's listing, and they just throw it in for their client to sign. You're preparing a Schedule A for your client. It's protecting your client. When you pull that Schedule B off of a listing, that's to protect their brokerage and their agent, right? That you should be reading that way more carefully because that's not coming from your hands and you're getting your client to sign it. I can tell you I've had a lot of RICO and TREB complaints over the years where people pull these Schedule Bs, they don't read them, they get their client to sign something and their client doesn't understand and they go, why would you get me to sign that? I didn't agree to that. Because that one is protecting their side of the transaction. That's why we're pulling it directly off their listing. So be very careful with those Schedule Bs, be careful with your own clauses too, though. The office is only copy and pasting standard clauses, right? At the end of the day, you can't say the admin put that clause in, I don't know, because you're the one with the license. RICO comes down on you at the end of the day, not admin, they don't care. The admin's doing you a favor by typing up your offers for you. You know, it's a full service office that way, but you should be reading, making sure the clause is catered to what you need in your transaction at the end of the day, right? So, anybody got any question?
Is it not the lawyer's duty to follow up all these things?
So during, a lot of time, the lawyer doesn't get the contract until it's an accepted and firm offer. So if you're not, say, waiving conditions in time, or if you're not putting conditions in that protect, like the lawyer's not walking through that house, if they don't know that there's water damage on the baseboard or something, they don't know that you're needing that in the contract, right? It's gonna be you out on the field because you're the one physically walking through the house with those people that they're gonna come down on and say, you should have seen it. The lawyer wouldn't know, right? Once the lawyer gets the contract, if he sees something, he'll obviously say something for sure. And there's parts of the contract, like the title search, that he has to pay attention to, he or she, sorry. But yeah, once they get the contract, it's usually signed and firm, right? They're not getting it during that conditional period. So it's up to us to sort of follow through with that.
After a farm deal,
Yeah,
I can work out for some reason of the house.
yeah, if it comes, something comes about,
For
but like I
no
say,
reason.
anything can happen as long as seller and buyer agree and you sign the mutual release, right?
Not the mutual release, they didn't sign the farm deal is firm. And then after closing, they find some problem in the house, minor problem, they can work out from that.
So it's happened before, like say for instance,
So this
you
is-
do one of your buyer visits and they've moved the furniture and you realize this bookshelf was covering a big hole in the wall.
Yeah.
You go to the lawyer right away, right? At that point, it's best to deal lawyer to lawyer. And they might ask you to do an amendment. If they ask you to do an amendment, you can say, okay, you know, for this property, I'm inserting a clause that the seller agrees to repair the hole in wall in east wall of the basement, you know, prior to closing, right?
Even
you
they
can-
didn't,
Yeah.
They didn't properly done it, so what do you mean?
Well, that's the thing is that if they have to show that it's done, you have to write your clause in such a way that, you know, the seller agrees to, you know, fix the hole in the east wall of the basement with a certified contractor and an invoice is to be given. And we will have one more buyer visit for approval prior to closing. Like if your client said something, like I would probably, you know, see how I wrote the clause the first time. But once I see your concern, I know my client's probably going to come back to me and say, was it done professionally? Was it done well? Now I know that's your concern. So I'm going to change my clause to fix that. So I know that I've exhausted every way to make you happy as my client. It's not good. You're not going to come back to me after and say, he did it himself. He did a DIY job and it looks horrible, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to say, okay, then we should make sure it's done by a contractor and we should go back for another buyer visit to look at it, to make sure it's done properly, right? That way, closing time comes, you want to like just breathe easy on closing day. You don't want to, like I say, hold your breath and go, I hope nothing's wrong. I hope nothing's wrong.
Whatever he did, I'm not happy with that.
Yeah, exactly.
So I don't want to close it.
Yeah, well, then you go back to the lawyer again and you say they did an improper job, but you have to have valid reason. Sometimes we need to talk our clients off a ledge. It's our job to be even and not make the situation excitable. Do you know what I mean? That's why I say whenever I come across these agents, these other agents, you know what I mean? And they're really hot-headed and they're really excitable. They're doing a poor job because our job is to keep it business and keep everybody lightheaded about the situation. So if my client was being really unreasonable, now they fixed the wall, it looks great, but like something that they don't like about it, and I think it's minor, I would say to them, okay, well, you can go and approach the lawyer and we'll see. But at this point, they've fulfilled their duty of what they're supposed to do. You know what I mean? If a home inspector came in, he probably wouldn't be considered that a problem. I don't think we're going to get compensated at this point for that. Like, you know what I mean? I would talk to my client like this because sometimes you just have to talk these hot clients off of a ledge. You know what I mean? And keep the job, everybody even. Your job is to be professionals, to keep everybody even at the end of the day, so the transaction closes smoothly and everybody's happy, right? So yeah, if they come back for something minor, then I definitely, I had somebody call me about a humidifier the other day. And I said, and he's closed like 3-4 months now. He called me like 2-3 nights ago. The humidifier is leaking. I'm like, okay, now you're into home maintenance. Like this isn't the first month that it's been cold. It's been snowing for, the past month. You've used the humidifier, you know what I mean? But it's leaking and I've only been here a short time. I said, no, I understand. I said, Anacare has great home care plans, so you don't even have to deal with it. You just call them. I talk them down off a ledge. You can add it to your Enbridge bill, then you don't have to worry about these things. I'm not going to go call for a transaction that closed 3-4 months ago over a humidifier. You know what I mean? Like it's a small item. You just have to, you have to talk them off a ledge sometimes. Yeah. So everybody good? Excellent.
Thank you for the information.
No problem. Everybody have a lovely morning and I will see you on Saturday. I'm excited. You coming Saturday, right?
Thank you very much.
Saturday for the gala.
Oh.
Yeah, you're coming, right? Yeah, you have to. Big party. We work hard all year to come to this point. We have to have a good time at the party, right?
6:30, yeah?
Yeah, be there sharp because the earlier everybody gets there, then we can start the awards and get to the party part. But lots of fun things planned for Saturday. So, all right, bye guys. I'll see you.